Good morning, everybody. And it's such a great pleasure to be here today on this webinar. Particularly important for me is the fact that my background is Russian. And although I don't speak Russian at all, I, at the same time, have a strong connection to Russia. And my grandmother had come from Kazan, and she was the storyteller in the family. So before I even begin today, I want to really pay tribute to my grandmother who taught me so much about storytelling and also who had such a great love for the Russian language. So thank you, and how beautiful to actually hear you translate that into Russian. So as I begin to think about what we're going to be discussing today, which is storytelling about the future, I'd like to present you with a fundamental principle in the work that I do. Now, there is an old Tibetan Buddhist teaching, and this is a story about the lion. When you throw a ball to a dog, the dog keeps its eye on the ball. But when you throw a ball to a lion, the lion keeps its gaze on you. Now, when we're talking about storytelling in business, the most important thing is to keep our lion's gaze on our audience, the people who are listening to us. Now, the interesting thing right now is that I can't see my audience. So how do I even begin to connect with you with my lion's gaze? The first thing is that I know that I'm being listened to right now, at least by this wonderful translator. So from the translator, I'm getting a constant feedback that my words are being received. Now, for me, this is a fundamental principle of storytelling. No matter where stories are told, whether it's in business, whether it's in the family, whether it's in the community, there is always one fundamental principle that in order for a story to be told, there has to be listening. Now, there's more information that I have about who's listening today and how they are listening. And that is because I've had many conversations with Artem. So Artem and all these conversations we've had have informed me about my audience that I have today. If there's nothing else that you take away from this webinar today, the most important thing when it comes to storytelling in business is that you must understand your audience. You must understand who you're talking to. So here is a way to think about this. Listening is like a vessel or a bowl, and storytelling is like a liquid being poured into the bowl. So just as the bowl gives the liquid its shape, so does listening give storytelling its shape. Now, you're all listening to me right now, but I don't know who you are listening to me. And how do I know? How do I understand then how my words are being received? So the one thing that I can do is ask you, please, to send messages in the message box. And in that way, I'll know that you're there. And the other thing that I'm going to do right now is ask the translator how things are going. Can I be heard? Is the voice quality clear? How is it over on that end? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so today I would like to share with you two stories. And that is because I'm talking about storying the future. So this is a really important distinction that I'm going to present to you now. A past story is a story that you tell yourself and others about what happened in the past. A future story is a story you tell yourself and others about what's going to happen in the future. So I want to tell you two stories right now that describe to you this difference between past storytelling and future storytelling. And these stories are really about two successful business enterprises that I have created here in New York. Okay, so here's the first story. I was a clinical psychologist and living in South Africa. And I decided to come to New York City to be a playwright because I wanted to be more creative. But the problem was I had to get a job in order to stay in the country, in the United States. So I began to work with troubled youth. Well, by the time I got my permanent residency in the United States, I really felt that I wasn't going to make it as a playwright. What was I to do? Because my psychology degree was not recognized here in the United States. So I went back to university to do my doctorate in social work and anthropology. And as part of this PhD, I needed to get some kind of job working with communities who were in trouble. So I got the one job that I didn't want, and that was working with people who were dying of HIV and AIDS. This was before there were any medications that could really change the lives of people with AIDS. My supervisor said to me, now listen, Murray, your job is to help the patients in this program to come to terms with the fact that they are dying. So I tried everything that I knew as a psychologist, asking people how they were feeling, trying to examine people's experience. But they just got angry with me, these patients. They said, we're dying. Who cares how we feel? Who cares how we understand our experience? We're dying. Don't you understand that, Murray? So I was completely stuck because everything that I knew had to be thrown out the window. Now, one thing that I noticed in this program was that when people died, their belongings would be put into these garbage bags. And nobody came to claim these bags because many of the people had been gay or had been drug users and they'd been rejected by their families. And I felt it was so sad that people were dying, leaving nothing of themselves behind. And then I realized that there's only one thing that all of us can leave behind, and that is our stories. So I created this method to teach these patients how to listen to and tell stories to one another. Now, one of these people was a mother of a 3-month-old, and she told me that she didn't have long to live. And she asked me to make a videotape of her story that she could leave for her daughter as a legacy. She made the video and she died 2 weeks later. Then all the patients in the program wanted videos. Now, here's the important thing that applies so specifically to business. The legislators of the state of New York were threatening cutbacks to people with HIV, financial cutbacks. And so my patients went to the government buildings and left the videotapes of their stories on the desks of the legislators. And they said, listen to my story and then tell me that I don't deserve services. And it's on the basis of those stories that the AIDS epidemic was changed worldwide. The legislators listened. The pharmaceutical companies listened. And those stories have made HIV and AIDS into an ordinary illness. So you see how storytelling has the capacity to win the minds and the hearts of those who are listening. I would also just like now to thank so much those who are giving their feedback in the chat column, and so that I know how you are listening. So what's so interesting for me about this is that this chance experience that happened to me in my life led to the development of a method. And that method has now been shared in many different situations, including business, of course, which is why I'm on this webinar, And this is my book, which is how the method is applied to the business environment. So next, let me go on to a future story. I'm a little bit concerned that about how much time I've got. You see, I'm already thinking about the future. So I'm going to ask the translator how long I've got. Thank you so much. Spasiba. So let me tell you about another thing that happened to me that led to another business. My parents live in Johannesburg, and I found out that they had been kidnapped. Some men with guns surrounded my mother when she was getting out of her car. And they were about to shoot her because they wanted to steal the car. But at that moment, another car came around the corner and could see what was going on. And so they pushed my mother into the back seat of her car. Now, my poor father was already quite suffering from dementia. And so he was sitting in the passenger seat. And then the driver, also with a gun, got into the driver's seat and sped off into the night. Now, when I found out about this story, it was from my sister who lives in Boston. And I said to them, did they hurt mom? Did they maybe even rape mom? And my sister said, I don't know. It was the worst night of my life, thinking about that. Finally, when it was 1 o'clock in the morning, US time, I was able to phone my mother in Johannesburg. I said to her, Mom, what happened? Did they touch you? Did they hurt you? She said, no, nothing like that. She said, but I've got to tell you that when they threw me into that car, I knew that was going to be my last day. This is how I'm going to die. Because often they kill people so that the people can't alert the police. So my mother said nothing. She didn't panic. She didn't shout or scream. Only after about 10 minutes, she said to them, please, whatever you do, do not hurt my husband. He is a very sick man. Finally, they brought my parents to a dark field that was completely deserted, and they said, get out of the car. And they were pointing their guns at my mother and said, get out of the car. And my mother said, no, I refuse to get out of this car. You cannot do this to us. And so they called for another car to come and transferred my parents into that other car. So they stole my mother's car, but she was able to save her life by sticking to her principles. I was so surprised to learn about my mother's courage and her bravery. I never knew these things about her. And so that at that moment, I decided one day I am going to create a major worldwide movement of mothers telling their stories. I had gone to a big 3,500 seat theater in New York City. And I decided this is the place to do a major event about mothers' stories. And I booked that space for 3 years later. See what I was doing? I was creating the future that didn't exist yet. And how I did that was by making it real so that people could relate to it. I told them what was going to happen in the future. So I'm very happy to tell you that next year, 2021, the World Mother Storytelling Project will launch in New York City. There will be a live event, there will be workshops for high school students, and there will even be an app. So it started with a vision, but in order for that vision to manifest, I had to tell a story about what the future was going to look like in a very real kind of way. This, folks, is what you have to do if you want your business to grow. You have to imagine how your business is going to be in the future, and you need to be able to tell other people how this business is going to be in the future. That's the only way that your story can grow. That's the only way that your business can grow. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. And I would like to thank Artem so much for this wonderful opportunity to share my ideas with my motherland. If you've got any feedback for me, please share it with Artem. And I would be so grateful to hear what that feedback is. And thank you so much to the translator. You were